Good evening. Welcome to my webinar. The title of the webinar is You Need to Build a Personal Injury Practice, and I'm going to add the word now. And the reason you need to build a personal injury practice now will be explained as we go through this presentation. I'd like to give you some of my qualifications. Those of you that are my clients, you know who I am. But for those of you that are not my clients, I'm Dr. Pete Fernandez. I've been a consultant for 35 years. I've consulted with over 5,000 chiropractors and started over 3,500 new practices. I've written 25 books on how to build a practice, over 200 papers published in our magazines. And I'm an expert on what's going to happen to our practices now and in the future. Here's what's going to happen to your practice in the next 3 to 5 years. Now, folks, the last time I gave this speech, I was almost tarred and feathered and rode out of town on a rail. The doctor said, "Pete, you're talking about something negative." Frankly, no, I wasn't. I was telling them what was going to happen and then what they could do to overcome what's going to happen. And that's what I'm going to talk to you today. I'll tell you what you can do to not get hurt because of the changes that we're going to face with insurance coverage. I want you to understand where I'm coming from. I'm here to ensure your practice's future, to protect you and our profession financially. There's good news and bad news. But with this presentation, I'm going to start with the bad news, then I'm going to give you the good news. The bad news is that the chiropractor's income from health insurance companies and from the government will plummet like a rock. They're going to pay you less and less for more and more of your work. And there's reasons for it. The first reason is there's financial pressure from the government to reduce your fees. Obamacare actually pays insurance companies if they lose money on Obamacare. Now, this is very important. If an insurance company loses $1 million, the government will pay them the $1 million so that they won't lose anything. However, Marco Rubio, who just ran for president, he passed a bill limiting their reimbursement to $14 million. That sounds like a lot of money. If an insurance company loses $14 million, they get $14 million from the federal government. However, United Insurance, which is our largest carrier, pulled out of Obamacare because they lost $1.2 billion in the first year with Obamacare. And they said, that's it, we're out. Blue Cross lost a similar amount. Now, put yourself in the position of the insurance companies. They must do something drastic to reduce their expenses in order to survive. No insurance company or no business has $1 billion sitting in a checking account somewhere. So they have to reduce their expenses to stay alive, and the majority of their expenses are doctor's fees, your fees. Okay? So here's what they're going to do. The insurance companies will reduce the doctor's health insurance fees to Medicare level or below. A bunch of them are already 70% of Medicare fees, some are 65%, et cetera, and they will go lower. They're going to reduce the number of office visits that you're allowed to treat. Now, that's not anything new to you. You've seen it already, where you have to call in and request permission to treat a patient. They'll allow you 4 or 5 visits, and that's all they're allowed. Now, that's going to be worse in the future, unfortunately. And then they'll reduce the services that they're going to pay for, including x-rays. If they determine that x-rays are not necessary for a chiropractor, boom, you're not going to be paid anything for your x-rays. Another thing that they're going to do, and they're already started doing, is tiering the doctors. In other words, they will look at their computers and they'll determine which group of doctors are the most expensive. So let's assume that's tier number 1. Then what's the next most expensive group of doctors? Tier 2. And the next group will be tier 3, which are the least expensive, the doctors that don't treat patients very much at all. Once they break it into tiers, it's simple. They will eliminate tier 1. Everyone that's the most falls in the most expensive category, they're not going to get paid. They're out. Then the next year, they'll turn around and they'll get rid of the tier 2 doctors. And the only ones that are going to be left over are the people that treat patients 3 or 4 visits at the lowest fees. I've actually seen this done in various states, and it's absolutely a shame. I saw a doctor that was a half a visit over a tier, and they dropped him just for half of a visit. Now, patients don't know the difference between good care and bad care. And the reason this is important is they'll do some phony questionnaires to patients. The doctors that are the 3rd tier, the ones that treat 2 or 3 visits, they'll ask them, were you satisfied with your care? Did your doctor do a good job? Well, of course, the patients don't know the difference between good or bad, so they're going to say yes. Okay? Now, to give you an example of how these insurance companies will reduce the number of visits you're allowed, my daughter Diane was averaging 5 visits a patient with a certain insurance company. She received a notice that she had 2 weeks to come up with a plan to reduce those number of visits to 3 visits a patient. Obviously, she dropped that insurance company. Another friend of mine was averaging 5 visits a patient, and he was notified by the insurance company to reduce his visits to 1 to 2 visits a patient. Now, it's simple. You cannot do it, and they just drop you. And now you're not going to be paid at all. Now, here's something that's significant. Insurance companies that are associated with Obamacare will get a 10% bonus if they significantly reduce a doctor's fees. Look in the newspapers. Look at the advertisements for the insurance companies. You will see where they rate insurance companies 4 stars, 5 stars, and so on. If an insurance company is rated 4.5 stars, 10% of the total amount of money they made that year, they will get as an extra bonus from the federal government. Now, why is that? Well, the stars mean how much they reduce the fees to the doctors. So the insurance companies that are rated 4.5 or 5 stars are the ones that are paying the least amount to their doctors. And now the next reason why you're going to see changes in our healthcare reimbursement is the political system that we have right now, the elections season. So let me explain what each one of the candidates intends to do to you. First of all, let's talk about the Democrats. Hillary Clinton. Hillary is the one who introduced HMOs and PPOs to everyone as far as healthcare is concerned. And what she's going to do is do more HMOs or PPOs, but she's going to put gatekeepers in. And the gatekeeper is a MD or a DC that will be in charge of taking care of a certain number of patients. They will be paid a monthly fee to take care of that group of patients. Any referral that they make to another doctor will come out of the gatekeeper's money. Obviously, the gatekeeper is not going to be too keen about referring anybody. So they'll treat the patients themselves, and the DCs can count on getting very few referrals. Now let's talk about Bernie Sanders. What he wants is Medicare or Medicaid for everybody. Basically the system that we have, but everybody covered. Now let's look at the Republicans, what they want to do. Ben Carson, He wants to pay doctors for concierge care. Concierge care is basically each MD, like general practitioners, will be given like 2,000 patients that they're responsible for. The government will give them $2,000 to $3,000 a year to take care of those 2,000 people. Again, if they refer patients to someone else, that will come out of their fees. Now, think about it. The chiropractors will get very little referrals. In other words, they'll just give them more pain pills and say you're okay. Now let's look at Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, and Ted Cruz, what they have proposed. What they want to do is drop Obamacare. Okay, so they're going to replace it with HMOs, PPOs, and health savings accounts, just exactly like we have right now. And they will increase Medicaid or welfare insurance. Now, the big key about what they want to do is what most people haven't spotted. If you listen to the debates, you found out they were talking about getting rid of the lines around the states. What they're talking about is somebody in Florida can buy an insurance policy from an insurance company in Connecticut. He could buy across state lines, so therefore he can shop for the cheapest policy. Sounds good, but really is bad. Because when you stop the lines around the states, you eliminate every state's insurance equality laws. People can buy insurance from one state that only pays for MDs. So chiropractors won't be paid at all. Now, I know this for a fact because I practice in Florida, and we had an insurance equality law. The businesses bought their policies from agents here in Florida, but the Florida agents sold them Georgia policies. And when they did that, of course, it was cheaper because there was no chiropractic coverage whatsoever. That's the danger of getting rid of the lines around the states. Now, John Kasich, he wants something similar, but he wants the doctor's fees to be posted and the doctor's fees to be advertised so patients can look and see who's the cheapest doctor and go to the cheapest doctor. He wants to have high quality care at the lowest price. Well, those two things really don't go together. And he wants to reward the doctors with the lowest prices because they're not charging very much. Now, that was all the bad news. That's why the amount of money that the doctors will bring in from health insurance companies is going to drop like a rock. Now let's talk about the good news. The good news is that you're going to have to change how you practice. And you're going to have some options. One is you can join a patient-centered medical home. This is a big group of doctors. They're all working together to hold down healthcare costs. And some of them will hire chiropractors and they'll pay you up to $50,000 a year. But you have to work for them full time and you have to play their game, basically. Now, if you're happy with $50,000 a year, God bless you, this would be a good place to work. But I think most doctors are not happy with that. The next option for you is to merge practices. Get 4 or 5 chiropractors in the same town. You get together into one building. This way you have one x-ray machine, one CA, and that CA is doing all the work for all the doctors in that building. Unfortunately, this is usually the blind leading the blind because no one knows how to run this kind of practice. Therefore, I recommend if you want to do one of these practice mergings, you need a consultant to guide you every step of the way. Now, the next version is very similar to what I just discussed, but it's called an incubator. Again, this is a big facility. A chiropractor or a layman owns the facility and manages all the practices. In other words, he provides the CAs, he provides the insurance CAs, he provides the therapists, the rheumatologists, etc. And all the chiropractors in that incubator practice exactly the same way with the same rules, have the same forms to use, etc. This drastically reduces overhead So this is a good idea. It's been done in California for years, and it really reduces the overhead for the doctors, so they make more money with less work. Now, you must have a consultant to go ahead and guide you in forming and running an incubator. Otherwise, it will blow up. You can't have a bunch of DCs voting on how to do something, because you can never have two DCs agree on anything. You have to have one chief, basically. Now, the next is stick with the health insurance practice that you presently have. Now, remember, we told you how all the income from these practices is going to drop like a rock. So whoever stays with that kind of insurance practice will have a large volume, low income, high stress practice with an enormous amount of paperwork. It'll be exhausting and not financially rewarding. Now, another version of practice is a very low overhead cash practice. Now, what I'm talking about here is one DC and one CA, and usually the CA will be the spouse. This doctor will have to have some kind of a magnetic personality to explain to the patients and convince them to come to him, pay cash, instead of using their insurance. And you know, sometimes that's difficult. He's got to be charismatic. He's got to have an almost no overhead practice. In other words, maybe an adjusting table and a couple chairs. That's about it. Now, he'll have the same amount of financial stress that the person that's doing insurance will have. Now, what I really recommend, and this is what I recommend for my clients, I'm doing it for years, is to develop a specialty practice. Now, the personal injury practice is a specialty practice, okay? Now, the key is, folks, only have a profitable specialty practice. Most specialties aren't profitable. I was reading a national magazine and it listed all the chiropractic specialties. I went down through all the specialties, and guess what? Not one of them were profitable. They were fun, interesting, but sure won't put a penny in the doctor's pockets. I personally I'm a chiropractic orthopedist. That and $1 will get me a cup of coffee at McDonald's. That's it. Doesn't increase income whatsoever. Now, there are specialties that are very profitable, and about 30 of them. But I'll give you an example of some. A decompression practice, a peripheral neuropathy practice, an advanced sports injury practice. These are separate kinds of practices that are specialties, that are cash-based, they're non-insurance reimbursable, and highly successful. Now, you'll have to practice differently, and you'll have to learn how to run a cash practice. You'll need a consultant to guide you on how to do that, because you got to be a pro at presenting case fee plans. In other words, telling a patient, you got to pay me a couple $1,000 instead of using your insurance policy. The doctor's got to be very good. The patients have a choice then. Pay cash for exceptional care or go to an insurance-based practice. Now, I recently had a seminar, and all the doctors attending were my $1 million a year doctors. All of them had specialty practices. Okay, it was absolutely neat. And this is in today's marketplace. It's even more important next year and the year after, when the insurance companies bear down and eliminate how much they're going to pay for the chiropractors. Now, let me talk to you about the number one specialty practice, the topic of this webinar, and it is how to build a personal injury practice. Now, I have a seminar that's coming up April 30th, May 1st, 2018, and this seminar is one of two seminars this year that we're having on building the personal injury practice. Let me just kind of give you some of the ideas of the classes that we will have. One, the introduction of the personal injury practice, where we will be talking about how you think of the personal injury practice is incorrect. That's why a lot of doctors try and do personal injury. They get mad at personal injury attorneys. They say, oh, heck, this isn't worth it, and so on. And it's the doctor's fault. personal injury practice can be a very financially rewarding practice. And frankly, it's the most fun of any kind of practice that there is, because you find what's wrong with the patients when you do an exam. And then when you do re-exams, you find how much you've improved the patients. Okay? The next we're going to get into at the seminar is how to provide or prove soft tissue injury. Now, folks, insurance companies are willing to pay for the PI care if they really think there's something wrong with the patient. So you're going to have to prove to them there is something wrong with the patient. Not just say there is, but you've got to prove it, and we will explain exactly how to do that at the seminars. We'll also talk about and teach how to get MDs to refer PI patients to you. That's one of the primary places that you can get PI patients. And then building your practice through relationship building. This is extremely important. PI, folks, is a good old boy network. Good old boys referring to the good old boys. That's relationship building. You refer to people you know and like. Well, how do you get attorneys to know and like you and want to refer to you and to nobody else? That's the purpose of this class. And then how to market to attorneys. Well, the doctor is going to be teaching this, does over $1 million a year in practice, marketing to attorneys. You'll learn a lot. And then my daughter Diane will be teaching the top things that chiropractor does to alienate attorneys. Yes, you heard it right. Some of the things that we DCs do upset the attorneys, and therefore they won't refer to you anymore. And you have to constantly try and build a practice, because some of the things you're doing is chasing the practice away. I'll teach you how to write a narrative report in 5 minutes. That's right, 5 minutes. You don't need to spend an hour or 2 hours writing a narrative report. That's all baloney. It's sold to you by people that want you to buy their narrative report programs. I'll show you how to do it in 5 minutes, and these are reports that the attorneys like. We'll also go into the successful attorney-doctor luncheon. In other words, when you meet with a PI attorney, what do you say? You're trying to get him to like you. You're trying to get him to refer to you. So what exactly do you do, and what do you say? We'll cover that completely. Then how to diagnose a PI case and how to spot a bad PI case. Because every now and then you're going to have someone come in your office that really wasn't hurt. And how do you find out that he wasn't hurt so you can dismiss him as a patient? You don't want to take care of these kind of people. And how to correctly bill a PI case. Okay? There's a correct way and an incorrect way. And then the fine art of documentation on a PI case. You got to prove it. You got to have it on paper, because an insurance adjuster hundreds of miles away has got to read what you say, and then they're going to determine whether or not to pay you. Now, I received some questions from those of you listening, and let me go over the questions and the answers. First question is what to say to attorneys to get referrals and still be legitimate. Well, basically, be legitimate. What can you say to an attorney? Okay, that you're good at PI, you know how to examine these cases, you know how to write your narratives and your daily visit notes, you can testify, you know, you've been specially trained, and you let them know what your qualifications are to handle a PI case. The next question is, my patient seems to get better and they want to stop coming. I have to prove to them that dysfunction is still present. Suggestions. Yes, you do an initial exam on the patient and you prove to them what's wrong. Then when you do your update examinations, you again show them that problem they have is still there, if so. And if it's still there, you tell them the consequences of it remaining there. And then when you do another re-exam, you know, if the problem is still there, you let them know again. So people will come to you if they think they have a good reason to come to you. And you've got to give them a good reason that's honest. What are the best ways to advertise and market and attract personal injury patients? Well, first of all, build your practice bigger, your regular practice. 14% of your regular practice will be PI. So now you've increased your PI practice. Secondly, advertising on the radio is one of the best ways to get PI patients, and advertising on television. Newspaper advertising does almost nothing, so don't waste your money. The next question is, how many attorneys should I develop a relationship with? Well, as many as possible. You won't be disappointed if you have 10 attorneys referring PI patients to you. That means you're good at giving them relief, you're good at correcting them, and you're good at communicating to the insurance company and to the attorneys what exactly is wrong with the patients. Next question is interesting. PI attorneys in my area don't like high bills. How can I treat the patient effectively, make money, and keep the attorney happy at all times? What is a good ballpark figure for a total bill of chiropractic services? Well, typical good bill would be anywhere from $4,000 to $6,000 to take care of a personal injury, a patient. Okay, you don't want high bills. High bills means the attorney has almost no chance of settling the case and even a lesser chance of winning a case in court. You're hurting the attorney when you treat excessively. Okay? You can make good money on a PI case because the patients hurt more. You know, when they're hurt more, they need to be treated more. You don't charge extra for a PI case, and you don't charge high office visits for a PI case. How do I know if an attorney's any good? Is it safe to accept an LOP from them? First of all, get together with your fellow chiropractors in your community and ask them about the various attorneys. They'll know. They've had experience with them. If an attorney is no good, you don't accept a letter of protection from him. If he is a good attorney, accept a letter of protection from him. It's that simple. The next question is, how do I attract unattached PI patients? I've already answered this in that you double the size of your regular practice, you advertise on TV, you advertise on the radio, and you'll attract unattached PI patients. The next question, is it better to send a patient for an MRI right away or wait to see how they respond to treatment? Well, the answer is simple. Never order an MRI unless you need one. If you need one, then you order it. Okay? Usually they want you to treat the patient for a couple of weeks prior to determining if you need the MRI. And the last question I have in front of me is, I've been practicing personal injury for a while now, and attorneys have generally sent me plenty of business. However, that seemed to stop recently. Lately now, they say that I have to send a patient. They will only send me a patient if I send them a patient on a one-to-one basis. What's the solution? When the patient seems to run to the attorney first, how can I generate more unattached? Okay, well, smart attorneys are going to try and get a one-to-one ratio of referrals. Okay, if you were an attorney, you would try and do the same thing. However, you obviously got to tell the attorney, most people go to the attorney first. So he gets them first. We get the patient second. So he has a better chance of referring to us than us to them. But now the solution is, go back to how do we get unattached PI patients? Build your general practice bigger, advertise on television, good advertising, and advertising on the radio. Now you've got unattached patients, and you can match the attorney one for one if possible. Now, I want you to consider, start converting your practice to a specialty practice now. I have discussed with you, okay, very clearly, why your income is going to drop because of what's going to happen to health insurance. This is the fact. It's going to happen. Just accept it. So develop a specialty practice. One of the specialties is personal injury, which we have discussed. And we've also discussed when we're having a seminar in about 2 or 3 weeks in Orlando, Florida. Come to the seminar and learn how to make personal injury a specialty practice for you. Then there's other specialty practices that you should get into. something that is non-insurance reimbursable specialty. So if the insurance companies drop what they pay, you don't care because you're getting paid by the patients. This is the practice of the future. Either you're going to work for insurance companies or you're going to be independent and have a specialty practice. And I want to remind all of you, I'm available to help you. If you need any help, call me, come to the seminars. I'm happy to help you. Thank you for listening.